You are listening to Be Amplified, the podcast with Bree and Thais, episode number 48.
Hey Amplifiers, welcome to Be Amplified, the podcast. My name is Thais.
And I'm Bree Seeley. We are the co-founders of the Amplify Collective,
a movement aimed at radically disrupting how purpose-driven women connect and operate in the world.
Because we believe it's not just what you do, but who you are that matters.
Each week, join us for messages and interviews that will leave you feeling amplified and ready to change the world.
Let's do this.
Amplifiers, it's Bree Seeley and
Thais Guy.
Thais. And this is take two because Thais just messed up the first one.
You know what? Don't judge me, okay? Don't judge me for being human and being imperfectly perfect. My soul is perfect, okay, Bree? That is what you must remember at all times.
Well, next time if your soul could remember to plug in your headphones, that would...
I will do my best. I will do my best. So we have a real good interview happening later on the podcast with Asha Dahya, and she has a lot of really incredible insights about her story being in a cult and being in an unhappy marriage and moving into her most amplified life. So that's coming up soon.
Yes. And before we get there, Thais, do we have any announcements?
Do we? I don't think we do.
I feel like I should have checked this before we started recording.
Oh, well, it's okay. So we do have one quick announcement. We have a dinner party coming up next week, the first Tuesday of June. So it's June 6th. We have a dinner party coming up. We've been talking about it on like all of the episodes because it's going to be really good, really juicy. It's different than any dinner party that we've had before.
The first of its kind.
It's going to be all-inclusive meal. Yeah, we're going to have all-inclusive beverages, all-inclusive everything. You just have to show up and you're going to have really amazing, impactful conversation with other heart-driven women. It's going to be good.
Gonna take care of you. It's going to be a beautiful night. Beautiful night.
So you can learn more on our website, theamplifycollective.com. Tickets are running out. We have one more week left. So if you feel called, if you're in LA, we would love to see you.
Fact.
That's it. That's the only announcement we have.
So one of my favorite parts of Asha's story that she will share with you guys is, like Thais said, how she was in a cult and she left it, and how she used her experiences to step into a greater purpose of elevating other women's voices along with her own. And I think it's just such a beautifully poignant example of the women supporting women movement, because you know, as Thais and I have been navigating this for the last 18 months, we see a lot of people saying women supporting women, hashtag women supporting women, hashtag women empowering women, and they're not actually walking the talk. And Asha is such a beautiful example of how to actually do this. And it's, you know, something that Thais and I very, 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 very much believe in as well. And that's this idea of the rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
But our culture is still so steeped in that idea that we have to compete, that we have to be at odds with one another in order for us to get ahead. And so we wanted to touch on this a little bit. And I know we've talked about this before, but we wanted to take it a little bit deeper and talk about how silencing other women's voices is actually doing a detriment to us. Like, by you silencing someone else's voice and you competing against them, and by you saying, well, I'm more important than you are, it's actually hurting you.
Yeah, so I, lead a masterclass in a group program called Own Your Spotlight, where we talk a lot about empowering our voice and activating our voice out into the community and being seen and being heard. And in the journey of us activating our voices and putting ourselves out there, when we are in a state where we don't feel very confident in ourselves, or we've been so indoctrinated by the patriarchal mindset, there are some insidious ways in which we silence other women. And most of it is unbeknownst, like it's unconscious to us. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is ways in which we silence one another, and then what we can start to do and to change in order for us to support each other's voices. Because, me lifting and activating my voice and Bree lifting and activating her voice is not mutually exclusive. And by me supporting Bree and Bree supporting me, we actually raise our voices even higher. Raising tide raises all ship, like Bree said. So let's talk about some ways in which women silence one another. One of the ways in which we do it, and we do it a lot, and it sounds silly, but it's not silly, is interrupting. We interrupt women all the time. I mean, and
Wait,
Bree.
what? Sorry.
Okay, so there is a
I
difference.
had
Though,
to.
there is a difference though between having like a banter, you know, like Bree and I interrupting each other. We're having a banter. We're talking. We're excited. There's a difference between that and when it really matters, in the sense of like in a board meeting, you know, in deep conversations where you're sharing your truth or you're sharing something like vulnerable, and then someone just interrupts you. And when we interrupt each other, we're basically saying, my voice is more important than your voice. What I have to offer is more important than what you have to offer. And that is one way in which you silence each other.
And what Thais and I really stand for is, what if both of your voices are important? And what if by the coming together of the two voices, you create something even more? What's the old saying? The sum is greater than the
parts.
total. Yeah, the sum is greater than the total of the parts, or something.
No.
I don't know.
No, I don't think that's it.
You guys get it. You understand. You know the thing that I'm talking about. And so what if by the coming together of your two voices, the and of your voices, it's creating a bigger impact in the world, and you're making more of a change, more of a statement, than if it were to be your voice or her voice.
And here's the deal. There are a lot of studies and statistics out there about the percentage of which men interrupt women. It's facts. It's overwhelming, the amount of times that men feel entitled to interrupt women, all unconscious. We're not blaming men. So if we grow up believing that it is normal to be interrupted, that it is normal, you know, for other people to interrupt us, then of course we're then going to interrupt other people because we think that that's normal. It's normal for a man to interrupt us, so it's normal for us to interrupt other women. It's not normal. This is not a new normal. We've got to change that shit.
So let's talk about, if we're in a situation and we're talking with a woman about something important, or we're at a board meeting or whatever, and we get interrupted. What is a super, super healthy way that we can stand up and say, hold on, I'm not done yet. Can you please wait? What would you do, Thais?
So I'm actually in a leadership training right now, and we are learning about nonviolent communication, which we shared last week, I believe, in our podcast. And it's all about the 4 steps to be clear in your communication so it's not violent. And one of the kind of ways that the leadership trainer has taught us to, when we're being interrupted, what to say is, excuse me, I would like to be heard. And what you're saying there is not stop interrupting me. We're not blaming. We're not saying to that person, you're wrong. But we are sharing our value, and we're sharing our feeling, and we're sharing our stance. It's just like, excuse me, I would like to be heard. And it will literally shock the person. And what are they going to do back? What are they going to say? No, I'm not going to hear you in front of the entire room, right? They're not going to say that. So the only kind of obvious answer is, my apologies, go ahead.
I love that.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was brilliant when she shared it, and I wrote it down. I was like, yes, need to remember this.
I want to know how many of our listeners are committed to trying this out. So if you guys are listening to this and you're in our Facebook community or on Twitter, tell us if you are committed to really standing in your power and asking to be heard if you're interrupted.
Excuse me, I'd like to be heard. Anytime you're being interrupted, especially by other men, right?
I'm going to start using this on you, Thais.
And if you notice yourself wanting to interrupt another woman, see if you can instead take a deep belly breath, and just make a mental note, like share this once she is done. And then once she's done, instead of just jumping into what you want to say, what if you say something that, like say something reflective back, like, I hear that you just said this, this, this. Did I get that right? Like really use that reflective language. This is a great tool to use in coaching, but also in making other people feel heard. It's so much more powerful for a woman to feel heard than for a woman to have to then hear your fucking opinion. So
What's
interrupting.
number two?
Yes. Okay. So number two is focusing on looks. This is a huge way in which women silence one another. And Brie and I have talked a lot about this in the past. When we focus and we judge other people based on their looks, and when we have an unconscious bias about their looks and what they are going to say and their presentation, we are inherently saying that their value only comes from looking like how society, deems acceptable. And that's not okay, ladies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways women look. The average size is what? Size 16? Like, there's a lot of shapes and lumps and bumps and faces and noses, and there's a
Hair
lot of ways.
colors and I mean like
And hair
types and
types and skin color. There's a lot of ways that women are packaged up.
fashions and all the things.
And that literally does not determine the power
value.
of their voice. It doesn't determine their worth. So let's be careful when we find ourselves wanting to judge other women. Like, how many times have we judged Michelle Obama based on what she's wearing, or Hillary Clinton based on what she's wearing, versus the merit of what they're saying?
Well, and I might even add that it's not even judgment. So, two of my girlfriends own a public relations company. They're in the fashion sphere. And they have found that within their company, when employees come in, they get applauded more based on their looks or based on, oh
Wow.
my God, you're wearing like the cutest outfit today, or your hair looks on point, or like your makeup is perfection, or all these things. And so they've instituted a compliment and acknowledgement policy, quote unquote. It's not like a policy, but really complimenting women on the merits of their skills and the merits of their
Mm.
output and the merits of how they're showing up and who they're being in the business and all of those things. So it's not just about judgment in a bad way. It's
Mhm,
also
mhm.
about really only seeing a woman's worth in the world based on how she looks, what she's wearing, her shopping habits, blah 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 blah.
I mean, there's nothing worse than sharing. Not okay. There are many other worse things. Let me rewind. It sucks when I share something cool on Instagram, like a really dark, deep, heartfelt thingy, and then I get, and it happens to have a picture of me or whatever because it's Instagram and you have to have pictures, and someone writes, "You're so cute."
I just got one of those on.
Fuck you. Fuck you. I am
Yep.
not fucking cute. I am intellectual. I am smart. I am witty. I am obnoxious. I am a lot of things.
I
Don't call me cute.
just posted on Instagram about one of our podcast episodes. We cover everything from imposter syndrome to visions to overcoming resistance, making a big announcement tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, this guy goes so cute with like 10 dots afterwards. And I'm
No,
like, it,
no.
it's a photo of us and like, great. But yeah, don't comment on our looks. There was another guy that was following you on Instagram that would go on and comment on all of your things and then started following me to comment on all of both of our things about like how attractive we are. And by the way, thank you. But
And
yeah, and
look,
like
we talked about this with Jennifer Love's episode. There's nothing wrong with being called attractive. We love being called attractive by our significant others. We love being called attractive when it comes, like when, Brie puts on a beautiful dress that she made. There's nothing wrong with being like, wow, you look beautiful. That's a beautiful piece of art that you've created for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when we are judging the content and value of someone's worth based on their looks, and that's all we're reflecting to them, that's all we're saying about them, that sucks, that's lame, and let's stop it. The patriarchy has kept women distracted by their looks for way too long. Let's
mm,
stop fucking perpetuating it and silencing each other by making people feel that unless they look like the stereotypical, what is it, 5'10", 100 pounds, white
36,
skin.
24, 36.
Yeah. No, that's not okay. That's not okay. So
Yeah.
moving on.
Number 3.
Great. And this is a little deeper one, and we can actually have a whole episode on this, but it's to really notice when you're gaslighting other women. So gaslighting is a term that comes from a play. I believe the play is called Gaslight, but I'm not positive. Where her husband dims the light in the house just a little bit every day, and she's like, is that lights being dimmed? And he's like, you're crazy. Like, that's not happening. Like, that's, you're delusional. That's not my experience at all. And so the woman starts to question her own judgment. Well, maybe it's not really dimming. And then, like, I guess at the end of the play, he like kills her, or some horror thingy or whatever. But the term is now being used for when we question other women's experiences because they're not our own. So when we say to somebody, you think, let's go all out, like someone saying like, I was racially profiled, and you're saying that didn't happen, that didn't happen because
You're
we don't live
making that up.
you're making that up because we don't live in a society. Well, that hasn't been my experience. Well, fuck you. It's not about your experience. And we do this a lot, where just because it's not our experience that we've been racially profiled, it must mean that it cannot be someone else's experience.
Yeah, when people are sharing their experiences with me personally that I don't have experience with, and it's maybe a little bit harder for me to like engage in dialogue with them, one of the things that I do is I will always, reflect back to them like, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing with me. Like, can
Mm-hmm.
you tell me more?
Yeah.
Like, instead of judging them or shutting them down or anything, I ask for more information because I genuinely, even though it's not my perspective,
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's wrong, and I want to know. Like, I want to understand where they're coming from. I want to understand their experience. I want to be able to step into their shoes and see through their eyes of what's happening in their life and in their world and all of those things.
So here's the dealio, people. When any woman, let's go with all humans, but we talk about women. So if another woman is sharing about their abuse, their pain, their discomfort, their fears, if they're sharing about their oppression, their marginalization, the only proper response is validation. Wow, that must have been painful. Whatever, some sort of validation and a sense of gratitude for their willingness to share and be brave. It is not easy to talk about our pains. It's not easy to talk about our fears, to talk about our abuse, but shaming them because that hasn't been your experience, even if it's the same person, shaming them, making them feel like what they're experiencing is not right or is not a, what you think is happening, it's not kind. It's not being a kind woman. It's not good. And we do this all of the fucking time, and it's very unconscious. The minute I started to understand the concept of gaslighting, I started seeing it everywhere, and I started to really notice when people do it to me. And that has given me a tremendous amount of power to start to acknowledge how that this is happening and start to own my power back.
So, question for you, Thais. When you have an experience where someone is doing that to you, what is your response?
Great question. I mean, generally, I'll just say something like, "Well, this is my experience, and I'm going to be unapologetic about it." Um, or I just may not respond or engage because when someone's gaslighting, they're clearly coming from a very hurt place, a very shut off place, and it's not my job to change their mind about my experience, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and defend. It obviously depends on the situation. Or I'll just flat out say you're gaslighting me and I don't appreciate it. And flat out call it out. And it's been really helpful to have this definition uh, to support me in validating my experiences and my worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something that Tice and I have had a lot of conversations about, and we don't necessarily agree on it, but this whole concept of like, it's not our job to educate people. And I fully, fully believe that. And I also feel like it's a little bit of our responsibility to let people know that their actions aren't okay. And yes, like, not every situation is going to be one where you can be like, hey, this thing is happening, and this is what I'm experiencing as a result of what you've said. Like, obviously not every situation is okay, but more often than not, for our listeners, I would really encourage you guys to take a stand and say something,
Yeah.
because the probability is that that people have picked this stuff up unconsciously, and they're
Yes.
not doing it on purpose, but
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And until someone points out to them what they're doing, they're not gonna know.
Yeah.
And so it is, as, empowered, amplified women, we do have a responsibility not to educate them, but to at least open that door a little bit, to be
Yeah.
like, hey, this is a thing, and I know you don't know it's a thing, but I'm just going to let you know it's a thing.
Mhm.
And then, anyways.
And I've been educating people. I've been actually
Yeah, you
purposefully
have.
going out of my way to really let people know that what's going on is not cool. Here's just a really quick example. There was a men's coach who had heard a quote.
I love this. I got a text about this. This is good. Sorry to interrupt you.
He shared a quote about, so he's a men's coach. I have deep respect for him as a coach in the men's field. He shared a quote by his a teacher that he was listening to, which is somewhat of the same quote that Dalai Lama said, that the world will be saved by the Western woman. It was something along those lines about how women are going to be the ones to save the world. And so in the post, he was curious about whether or not he should start opening himself up to coaching women. And he shared that he sees that a lot of women are leading in these spaces of self-development and self-actualization and spirituality, and he was wondering if he should, and he tagged a bunch of women's coaches for their input. He did not tag me for my input. I decided to give him my input regardless. And I was basically like, let women lead. Do not insert you are a man. Your expertise should be focusing on supporting men support women. The idea to me that just it feels too opportunistic. Like, oh, you're saying that women want to awaken, so you're now going to make money off of supporting women awaken. But marginalized voices need to have marginalized leaders rise in the ranks. If I see, for example, Black women wanting to rise up, I'm not going to go, oh, cool, there's Black women want coaches, like I'm gonna go on ahead, and as a white woman I'm gonna go on ahead and coach them, because that feels like I feel called to do that. No, my role is to support other Black women coaches rally their community, because they are the ones that's been marginalized. Men have been oppressing women for thousands of years. If you want to see women rise up, support women in their rise, not by inserting your manly men. Anyway, so the entire conversation, I noticed how he was very closed off to the idea of the fact that men oppress women. He was very closed off. And so when you're talking to someone who's very closed off about things that are very, very real, it's very easy to gaslight. Because you're closed off, you literally cannot understand where someone else is coming from. And so this may happen to you. You may be gaslighting unintentionally, or somebody may be gaslighting you. And what really helps is to really get in touch with what is true. So that was a fun experience.
It was. I loved the text messages.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't. I wasn't really invited into the conversation. I didn't know if I should say something. He ended up being very receptive. And let's go into the next one, and then we'll wrap it up and bring on Asha. But the next way that we silence one another is tone policing. And this is also something that he unintentionally did, and we do all the time. And I find myself navigating this a lot in the activism, like, in the social justice world, just knowing how to communicate with people. And tone policing is people taking the merits of how you say something versus what you say. So this happens a lot with women, or like, you're too emotional. I can't speak to you when you're this emotional. That's tone policing. That's saying, I can't hear you because you're not speaking in a way that I'm open to hearing it. Anger is a big one. You're too angry. This is too angry. It sounds like you're too angry at the patriarchy for me to accept what you're saying.
The guy did this to me. The one who I said to him, I was like, I don't appreciate.
Oh, the one who made you feel worthless, or not?
Yeah,
made
the
you
one
feel,
that made
but,
me.
yeah.
Well, yeah. And he said to me, he's like, you're clearly too sensitive.
Yeah.
That's what he said to me. And Thais got a whole string of voice. I didn't even text her. She got voice memos. Fuck this guy.
Yeah. So when we tone police each other, we're essentially saying, unless you share your message in the right way,
in a way that makes me comfortable.
Yes, that makes me feel good about myself, I'm not going to listen. And when we're talking about feelings and uncomfortable truths, when we're confronting someone that they did something that was not cool, it's not going to come out right. When Brie and I have had conversations in our relationship about things that we've been doing that kind of hurt the other person, it doesn't always come out as this perfect poetic narrative. It comes out.
Let's correct that. It never comes out. It's not sometimes. It never.
So if I were to be saying to Brie, like, listen, like this really hurt, and I start crying or whatever, and she were to say to me, I can't speak to you when you're this emotional. Can you imagine what that would do to me, what that would feel like for me, how unsafe I would feel in ever wanting to speak to her again about something like this?
Well, and I feel like that would be a combination of this and gaslighting as well, because it's
Yes.
like, oh, well, that's not my experience. I'm unwilling to have that experience, so I'm just not going to engage in this with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are all the ways that we do it. And it's very, very unconscious. And we've been taught that it's acceptable to do this. Really, really notice next time you're reading something, and because it sounds angry, if you're being closed off to hearing what this person has to say, if you're feeling attacked or if you're feeling guilty, like it's not my responsibility to make the message sound good to you. I mean, it's definitely a consideration because I want it to land with you. But if it's something like my life is in the line, if it's something serious, like I'm so angry because this dictator just took away my rights to vote, I'm not going to sit here and be all philosophical and nice about it. I'm going to get angry. And as sisters, as women supporting women, we really, really have to notice when we're trying to bring other women down, because we're silencing ourselves when we silence other women. We're only hurting the cause.
Fact. Yeah, this has been a great chat.
Yeah.
Longer than our usual intros, but super good.
Yeah, I feel like this is really, really, really important. Really
important. And now Thais and I've kind of talked about what not to do. You can hear Asha speak now and then check out her website to see what to do. I mean, Asha's a brilliant example of women supporting women, like without expectation, without gain, like literally just bringing other women up in the world, because it's what women do. I know we've been told that it's not what we do for a really long time, but those are lies. So you can stop hearing them and listening to them and believing them. And remember, from Thais, Brie, and I'm speaking for her, Asha, this is what we do. And it's time for us to reclaim this, because it is.
And that doesn't mean that we can't hold each other accountable. That doesn't mean we can't call out bad behavior. It doesn't mean that we have to roll over and not look when someone is doing something that's out of integrity. It's just really notice the small things that we are doing that are bringing each other down, and if feminism, if the increase of women's rights and equality in the world is going to happen in a large scale, we've got to do it with the mindset of intersectionality. We have to do it with rallying all women, not just a small group of women that have a select skin color and have a select look. And if we're going to rise all women together, we have to be able to hold the space in a container of listening, so we're not tone policing and gaslighting and belittling other women, because their experiences, their narratives make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Really, really important. So let's bring on Asha. Let's bring it on. Let's make this happen.
Okay.
All right, I am so excited for our next guest.
I know, she is one of my favorite women, and she has an accent, which I know you love.
I mean, I do love that. She's also brilliant and intelligent and all the good things, but her accent is like the cherry on the cake. Cherry on the pie? Pie on the cherry? Cherry? Okay, whatever the cherry thing is. That's the expression I'm looking for.
Let me introduce you guys to Asha Dahya. So Asha is a host, writer, and content creator with 15 years of both broadcast and digital media experience. Born in the UK, raised in Australia, East Indian by ethnicity, and residing in Los Angeles, Asha is a great representative of the diverse millennial generation who are seeking new ways to push the boundaries and disrupt mainstream conversations. Having previously worked for ABC, MSN.com, Disney, Fox, Nickelodeon, TV Guide, MTV Australia, and Nine Network Australia, Asha has a comprehensive grasp on many aspects of media production. She's also the creator and editor-in-chief of girltalkhq.com, a daily women's feminist news media site. P.S. Write that down and go visit it now. Her passion is to use her voice and platform to amplify, great word, the stories of women around the world. She is specifically interested in the intersection of reproductive rights, religion, race, and gender equality.
Welcome, Asha, to Be Amplified.
Hello, thanks for having me. And I can't believe I put that word amplify in there, and it wasn't even just for this, I swear.
I love it. I love it.
Well, so clearly we're in alignment.
Yes. Asha, tell us, what does it look like for you to live an amplified life?
I think for me, it was just finding my true voice and discovering what my passion was, and not just living according to the world's rules or family rules or cultural rules. It was just discovering who I was and being unapologetic about it.
I love it. And I love that you mentioned your voice. I'm curious, like, what does that mean for you, stepping into your voice?
Well, so my background, and this is why I put religion in my particular areas of passion, I grew up in a very fundamental Christian household, and it wasn't necessarily my parents that were the culprits, quote unquote, but just that environment was very stifling, and is a lot of stifling for a lot of women, and can be for men too, but typically for women. So I was never really taught to think for myself, be different, be a rebel, go out and like conquer the world. Although my parents were very much like, you know, go to college, get a career. And my dad was very feminist in the sense he was like, don't ever give up your career for a man, all this kind of stuff. But generally, like, that religious upbringing wasn't conducive to me going out and discovering who I was. It was about just read the Bible, do what's in it, and do the right thing. Always do the right thing, and, you know, follow these legalistic rules. And it wasn't until I went through a divorce. My first husband, because I'm married again now, but my first husband, I married when I was 24, and we were part of this fundamental church here in Los Angeles. And it kind of took that Christian background to a whole new level where it was even more stifling. And it wasn't until I left that marriage that I realized, what the hell was I just part of? Like, who was I? I didn't even, I felt like I was just existing in that space, not thinking for myself and feeling guilty about any little thing. And then it wasn't until I stepped away from that, and while I am still a spiritual person, very much so, it was about discovering what my spirituality looks like, who I am as Asha, as an individual and unique person. And so I guess that's how I found my voice. And it's still a journey. I'm still discovering many aspects of it.
So question, what was the moment or the few moments that made you really kind of pause and look at what you were doing and realize that it was no longer in alignment for you?
Well, it was definitely being part of my marriage, because at that time my career wasn't, like, I was doing some jobs here and there, but it wasn't going anywhere. I was basically just kind of doing things to make a bit of money. There was no forward momentum. So, I mean, it was a very abusive and toxic situation. And I think for me, it was getting the bravery and getting the courage to, I was too scared to tell anyone, especially people that I worked with. I was working on a TV production, and I would never tell any of my friends, because for some reason I thought it reflected badly on me if I told them I was in a bad marriage, and I would be embarrassed. Like, that's kind of the mindset I was taught. Like, you don't talk about your marriage, don't badmouth your spouse, you know, you just fix it no matter what. That's what God tells you to do. So I just would never talk about it. But then finally I got close enough to a friend at work, and I was admitting things like, yeah, you know, this is going on. And they were like, Asha, you're not even in a proper relationship, let alone a marriage. Like, get out of there. And I think it took someone giving me that objective perspective. Like, well, first, the first piece of advice wasn't just get out of there. It was like, well, why don't you speak up about the things that concern you? Why don't you talk to your husband and communicate with him that he's making you feel this way? I was like, yeah, okay. And I'd never had that advice, really. And so just having that encouragement and support to be like, no, your voice matters. You should speak up. You know, it's not going to change otherwise. And so that kind of set off a chain reaction of events. And then eventually I was like, okay, I've tried to do as much as I can, and this is not getting any better, and I have a life to live. So see you later. I guess that's the best way to sum it up.
I love that. I feel like your story, and I know the story of so many women who are in a marriage that is unhappy. It's amazing at how long women can go being dissatisfied without saying anything because they just weren't taught to anything different.
Yeah, it's really sad and scary, and it's still happening today.
Oh, for
in
certainly.
a world where so many women are empowered. It's like, don't rock the boat, just dull yourself down, shrink yourself, don't take up too much room, don't rock the boat, don't say anything that's going to cause any sort of ruckus. It's like, I clearly remember one piece of advice from someone who I thought was one of my best friends in this church that I was going to, and I was explaining to all these awful things that were happening, just awful situations. She kind of got exasperated with me, and she goes, well, Asha, you've just got to figure out whether you're going to do the right thing, whether you want to do the right thing, whether he does or not, as in you just try and do what you should be doing according to the Bible and according to church, and if he doesn't, it doesn't matter because that's what God tells you to do. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is really sad.
Yeah. And it's, it almost sounds like you are in a kind of cult setting, would you say?
Yes. You want to know what's really funny?
Yes.
I've been to other churches since then, and I go to a great community church near where I live, and they're very, very much about like doing things for the community and helping people in practical ways. So I love it. But one of the women who goes there, who's a leader, she actually used to go to this church and used to be on staff there as a pastor. And she goes to me, oh, yeah, that church, I'm not going to mention her name. She goes, oh, yeah, that church, that's a cult. And I was like, oh, that's so funny that you said that, because a lot of people say that who aren't necessarily spiritual or come from the Christian world. But the fact that she even put word to it, I was like, okay, that just made me think I made the right decision. And yeah, it was very cultish and still is.
I love cults. I love cults. Not to obviously be in them, but I love the psychology behind cults because I see such overlap between the psychology of cults and marketing psychology.
That's very interesting. I'm really fascinated with them too, from just coming from my background. But yeah, the marketing, a lot of it is really brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just look at Apple. In many ways, people say that Apple products are a cult. Your ownership of a Mac product defines you in a certain capacity where you're put in a space above other people. Anyway, we don't need to get into cults today, but I just love that perspective and I love your story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, thanks for letting me share it.
So what happened on the other side of that decision? Because of course, the decision is monumental. And then, you leave the church, leave your husband, and then it's always like you have this whole world at your fingertips now. Like, what was kind of your next step in figuring out your voice and kind of getting to where you are now, starting Girl Talk HQ, all that stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think it was a gradual realization for me. I got out of that environment, but I was still kind of thinking that way. But at the same time, I was really a lot more motivated to do stuff for myself, especially career related. And I was working in TV and I was doing production jobs, and I was just kind of like going from one thing to another and just had no momentum. And so I thought of this idea like, oh, maybe I should try and pitch a TV show and get my agent to help me pitch it. And it was about like getting a bunch of women that I knew that were in the same kind of hosting and content creating space as me, and kind of like a talk show idea. Anyway, that didn't end up going anywhere. But in the meantime, I would see a lot of my friends start different blogs, like a fashion blog or a travel blog or a food blog or about subcultures. And I was like, oh, I could just start one of those and just see what happens. And I'd also started becoming really interested in feminism and women's issues and a little bit of politics, but not so much just yet. And I really wanted a space to use my media experience and talk about women's stories that weren't being amplified or talked about in a mainstream way. It definitely is more now in 2017, but back in 2011, a lot of it was about the Kardashians. I'm not slagging them off, but it was just very much about like the celebrities and these people. It's like, where are the stories of women who went through some like really crappy stuff and triumphed and are now like mentoring a community of young girls? So I was just like, all right, I'm going to start a blog and I'm just going to write about these women that I read or I hear about, and just kind of make a space where it's for me. And so I started Girl Talk HQ as a way to be like, I want a site where I can go every day, pick any article and read a story about a woman or a topic that inspires me. And so that was kind of like the starting seed of an idea. And then it just kind of grew and evolved from there over the past few years.
And it's amazing, seeing your work and seeing how outspoken you are and how much of your voice you use. And I'm curious, what was the biggest challenge for you going from realizing that you weren't using your voice at all to now being, this very outspoken and well-articulated individual?
The biggest challenge, on a practical level, it was like, okay, what is this Girl Talk HQ thing? Am I going to turn it into a business? Am I just going to see where it goes and start it as a blog? How do I grow my readership? So those kind of are ongoing challenges. But in a personal sense, the challenge was, what are people going to say? Like, if I speak up about birth control or abortion or these issues that I feel really strongly about, are people going to hate me? Are they going to write nasty comments? Or if I share it on my Facebook page, are people going to look down on me because I'm not like this churchy girl anymore? And so that was probably the biggest fear that I had, like, other people's reactions, which sounds so stupid, but it's a very real and paralyzing thing in a lot of people's lives.
It's definitely not stupid. So many people that I know, people that we know, that's their number one fear is, what are people going to think? There's no way I can talk about this or share this or be vulnerable about this because people are going to judge me.
Yeah, it's really, it's sad that happens because it stops a lot of people from really stepping into their full potential.
So what did you do? How did you move through that?
I think I just started with little things. Like, I wasn't making, major political statements like I am now. And I guess a lot of people are since the election and all of that. But it would just be slowly like sharing stories of just badass women who were breaking barriers, who I thought were very inspiring. And I just kind of started branding my voice that way. I hate to use that word, but that's the best way to describe it. And so I think over time people started realizing, oh, that's her thing, that's her passion. And it got to a point where people would write to me on Facebook, they would send me private messages, nothing bad, but they would send me suggestions for articles like, oh, have you seen this? Have you heard about this woman? Like, or tag me in different posts. I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay, so they get it. Nothing bad happened, but people are now like realizing, oh, this is what I'm interested in. So yeah, I had a few friends from that old church kind of write comments here and there when I would call out issues that I felt were really bad or, very destructive to women. And they would, write comments which I knew came from a mindset of, I'm only thinking about the church and the Bible and the God way. And so I just kind of learned to realize that, okay, they're still in that space. I'm not. Let them think that way. I can't change everyone's minds, whatever.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask next is like, how do you address, for all the women who are terrified of speaking up because of, the comments and opinions of others? It is inevitable that you're going to receive a hate comment or that you're going to receive a comment of dissent. And I'm curious, was there a particular experience that really sticks out to you of a moment where you received a comment that felt really just yicky and how you moved through that?
I don't have one particular standout experiences. There have been a few that I've started to realize, okay, what is the difference between constructive criticism and a conversation with differing viewpoints versus just flat out abusive language and hateful. So once I kind of learned to tell the difference between those two and, okay, I'm not going to respond to the latter because these are just hateful people and there's no having a decent conversation with them. Whereas there have been people who, specifically when I've posted stuff about abortion and they're very conservative people, I had to delete a few from my Facebook because they were posting far too many like pro-Trump things, and I was just like, no, this is too much. But the ones that I still am friends with, the ones who responded, they would share their views, and not necessarily in the best way or in the most facts-driven way, but I could see their heart and I could see that they genuinely cared and they weren't trying to be mean or horrible. And so I would engage in a conversation with them in a very respectful way. So that's the way that I've learned to, whether I respond or not.
And does it work? Have you found that having conversations with people in this capacity has helped them open their eyes to something different?
I think so. Yeah, there's one conversation I had with a girl I used to go to church with, and it was something about, I posted something about equal marriage, and she's a very lovely girl, but I don't think she'd done a lot of research about the issue, and her perspective is her perspective, and I expected it. And I'd written something very positive about, it might have been the Supreme Court decision from 2015, and she said something to me like, Asha, if you don't think gay marriage is going to affect you and society badly, you're wrong. And, she was just kind of explaining herself without giving any sort of evidence. And I said to her, okay, please give me some examples of how someone else getting married to someone they love is going to impact my life. I just want to know. And she didn't write back, and she clearly didn't give any examples. So I don't know if I changed her mind, but I think I was able to pose a question that kind of cut right to the heart of the matter, rather than being like, oh, you're an idiot, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, you're a bigot. It was just a question. And she still, converses with me and writes to me every now and then. So I think when I've learned that to ask respectful questions, but very blunt and pointed questions, that's probably been the best way. I don't know if I have any clear examples of like, oh my gosh, I changed this person's mind and now they think like me.
I don't know if there's anything deeper to go here, but I really would love to touch on this a little bit further, because I know that so many people have struggled in the last several months with having these kinds of conversations. I mean, I can't tell you how many Facebook posts I saw that were like, I can't go home for Christmas because it's just going to be a massive fight. So, I love this idea of asking questions. Are there any other tips that you would have for people whose maybe family or close friends don't necessarily have the same beliefs as them? Because I know this is something that is just tearing people apart right now. It's breaking people's hearts that they are unaccepted by their family because they voted in a different way, or because they believe in, gay marriage or abortion or whatever.
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to figure out the right thing to do, because it is one of the biggest questions right now in our country. I think definitely asking questions, and just learning to come at every conversation with respect and love, especially if they're family members or people you know very well. Just remember that they're still human beings, and a lot of them, and I'm not trying to say this in a sorry, my phone is just ringing.
Miracle moment.
Yeah, so I think the best way is to come at every conversation with love and respect, and just remember that there's a human on the other side of that, albeit bigoted perspective and comment, but and then knowing when to tap out a conversation as well. I think there comes a point where it becomes toxic, especially if it's online or social media. Those are the only tips that I have. I wish I had more advice, because I'm not in that specific situation, but I know a lot of friends who are as well. But and knowing when to, especially on social media, when to pipe up and not. I think that's also important, because any one of us could just kind of get involved in any random conversation, and I'm guilty of doing it here and there, and it's like, let's pick our battles as well.
I was just going to ask, because I'm seeing, the rise of people's awareness of the political conversation, which I guess could be seen as the good of Trump is that he's bringing people into awareness of what's going on in our country. Now they have to read the news, they have to study, they have to understand what's going on, which is great. I'm seeing a rise in people being interested in the conversations of racism, intersectional feminism, it's really incredible. And I know that there's a lot of people that are in conflict. They have a business, let's say they're a coach, healer, teacher, they're a copywriter, whatever, they're an entrepreneur in some capacity, but they're starting to have this desire to share and to have conversations about what's going on in the political atmosphere, but they feel like they can't be political because their business isn't necessarily political.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious what your perspective is on that. You know, should people, well, I don't want to say should. Yeah, what are your thoughts around people's desire to speak up and having to navigate their business that may not necessarily be in the political conversation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I was at a restaurant the other day and I overheard a similar conversation where these three men were talking about, like, they went somewhere and they saw a sign out the front that said, "We're pro-Trump, pants," that kind of thing. And they were like, you should be accepting, you're a business, you should just accept money from whoever, don't put a political stance. And to one degree, I agreed with them, but I think it depends what the business is. Like for me, where I have a media website, so I can kind of be a bit more political and still make money and not feel like, oh, am I going to lose customers or readers or whatever. Whereas if you're like a hairdresser or a restaurant owner, I think it's different, and this is just my opinion. If I had a restaurant, I probably wouldn't put a pro-Trump banner out the front or even, like I wouldn't even put a pro-Hillary thing out there. Maybe on voting day, on election day, you could have stickers or whatever. But yeah, I think I would be very careful because the reason why I say that is because there are some parts of the country where, and I know we've all heard of these stories where, like bakers or florists don't want to serve gay people because they're Christian owners. And, and there have been Supreme Court cases where these Christian owners of a for-profit business want the law to side with them and say that they don't have to serve someone else in the business space because of their own closely held beliefs. And I think that's wrong. You're a for-profit business. You're there to provide a service. How is a gay person walking into your premises affecting your ability to practice your faith? So when I look at that, and then I look at, the other end of declaring something politically, it can be divisive in that way. If you want to have a conversation with a customer about it, if it comes up, I think that's different. But yeah, I think for businesses, it's tricky. And, I'm able to say this, I'm not a traditional business owner. So, that's just my opinion.
So, Miss Asha, the $1 million question, when are you running for office?
I've thought about it at times, and then I'm just like, hell no. Only because I'm happy to be like a rallier, community organizer, and get involved and all of that. But I just think about how dirty politics is, and lobbying and like money, and just how awful it can be. And I think to myself, well, I wouldn't be part of that. I would just, be honest and good, and people would see that. But they don't, because they see the loudest, most clickbaity message, and then they vote for that guy for president. So I don't know. Maybe it'll change over time as I get older, but I'm really encouraged by a lot of young women, especially that I see here in Los Angeles, who are running for office. One of my friends just ran for West Hollywood City Council, and she didn't win, but the fact that she was so inspired by the election, I was like, yes, this is awesome. So not anytime soon for me, but I'll keep you posted.
I did just see a video yesterday of the most amazing woman who's running for mayor of Seattle. I've been seeing more and more, examples of this, and I just think it's super cool. And if you decided to run, I think you'd be brilliant at it, regardless of the current model of politics.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll keep that in my back pocket.
So what advice would you give for young women who are starting to get involved in politics and they're starting to understand, the conversations that are going on? Maybe they're just starting to understand what feminism really means and the issues that are happening in our country. What would you tell them to continue their studies and continue their education?
I would first say, especially in regard to feminism, if your feminism isn't intersectional, then it's not truly feminism. Like, feminism is about the intersection of so many issues, race, sexuality,
Asha,
immigration, socioeconomic status, all these different issues.
Asha, pause. You broke out for a minute, and that was a really important statement, so I want you to say that again, pretty please.
Okay, sure, no worries.
So start at if your feminism isn't intersectional.
Okay. First, I would say in regard to feminism, if your feminism isn't intersectional, then it's not truly feminism today. There's a great awareness right now in our political culture that feminism doesn't exist in a vacuum of its own. It's not just about equality. It's about how does race factor into that? How does age factor in? How does immigration status? How does your sexuality play into that? And so I think it has to be an acknowledgement of all these different issues and how they affect people, like with reproductive rights. Black women are affected a lot differently by policy than white women are, for instance. So I think to encourage young women, I would first start with an issue that you care about. I mean, for me, politics has to be about the issues, not just the candidate. Yes, a candidate has to be, a great speaker and, all these kind of things. Like, look at Barack Obama. He was a fantastic speaker. He was a good looking guy. He was young. He had like the external package. But also George W. Bush was a really crap speaker, didn't really know crap about anything, but he got elected. So I think if you really want to be a person that has a good political legacy, start with the issues, find something you care about, and get involved in your community. If it's homelessness or if it's teen mothers, I guarantee you, if you look in the city or the town where you live, there's a need that you can get involved and start learning the issues of people around you, because that's what politics should be about, serving the people in your community or in your city. So that's where I would encourage people to start. If you want to kind of learn what politics is about day to day, volunteer at your local councilperson's office, go down to City Hall and see if you can get an internship and just learn what it's like, because what we see in the media is so different to what it is on a day-to-day basis. There aren't TV cameras everywhere. A lot of it is very unglamorous and probably boring for most people. But if you care about making a change in your community, those things are what's going to matter. So start with the issues, start locally, and just get involved.
I love it.
And the more you want to get educated, you should add to your morning routine checking in with Girl Talk HQ every day and maybe reading an article. Like, that's really all it takes, 5 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely education is important.
Yes. So, Asha, where can people learn more about you other than Girl Talk HQ?
So you can check me out on Twitter. I'm just at Asha Dahya, ASHADAHYA. I'm also on Facebook. If you just go to facebook.com/Asha Dahya page, because apparently Asha Dahya was already taken. No big deal. So yeah, and I'm also on Instagram, but I just post for Girl Talk HQ. So just at Girl Talk HQ. Those are the places you can find me. And I'm also working on a couple of documentary projects which are forthcoming. So stay tuned for those, and I'll start posting more about them on Facebook and Twitter.
Yes.
Amazing. And all those links will also be in the show notes if you didn't get a chance to write them all down. So thank you, Miss Asha. We love you. This has been such a great conversation and a brilliant way to start the week.
Thank you. Love you guys too. And I love what you're doing as well.
Thank you. And for all of those who want more of Amplify, including an extended cut of our conversation with Asha, you can join our Facebook group at www.beamplified.community. That will take you to our Facebook group where you get access to our extended cut. And you can also find us on all the social media channels at The Amplify Co.
See you next week. Go be amplified.